Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable host, Brian Fisher. I want to take a few minutes in the monologue section today to talk about the law in Russia. You probably heard about this, the new law in Russia that provides sanctions for anybody who tries to recruit teenagers into the homosexual lifestyle. So it's against the law to propagandize teenagers into the homosexual lifestyle in Russia. Now, gay activists are just apoplectic about this. They're furious about this. And Russia has made it clear, look, this law is going to be enforced during the Winter Olympics. And we are going to expect you as a guest in our country to have respect for our laws and to observe them. And I've said before, look, if people really believe in tolerance and diversity and multiculturalism, they believe in the wonders of the multicultural experience, then they ought to be celebrating this. They ought to be saying, that's great. We respect the right of Russia to have its own traditions and its own values. That's what tolerance is all about. That's what multiculturalism is all about. That's what diversity is all about, but they don't. They have no tolerance for this law in Russia. Now, homosexual behavior has been legal in Russia since 1993, and the Russian government has made it very clear. Look, we're not going to stop anybody from engaging in whatever kind of sexual practices they want to engage in, as long as it's in private. That behavior is legal in this country. Nobody has to worry that we're going to be busting into people's bedrooms. Nobody has to worry about getting any kind of legal trouble for engaging in this kind of conduct, because it's been legal in this country since 1993. So essentially what the Russian government has said to homosexuals is, look, if you keep your conduct in the privacy of your bedrooms, you have nothing to fear. Keep it in the bedroom and out of the street, and you got nothing to worry about. But if you bring it out on the street, you start propagandizing, you start sending messages that Russia's teenagers are going to hear and be drawn to experiment with and begin to engage in homosexual behavior, that is a horse of a different color. There's a lot of reasons for what Russia's doing here. I think part of it actually comes from their Christian heritage. They're trying to scramble their way back to some approximation of Christian morality. They're a long way from getting there. Don't misunderstand me. But I think it's part of it. They understand that homosexual behavior is a moral evil among teenagers. Now, they need to get to the point where they recognize it's a moral evil for anybody, but at least they're ahead of us on recognizing that it's a moral evil to propagandize this lifestyle among teenagers, and it is illegal for teenagers to engage in this kind of behavior. You can't do it legally until you turn 18. So that's Russian law. And I think also Russia's got a crippling population problem. I mean, I think they understand that, I mean, just a biological reality that homosexuals cannot conceive. They cannot give birth to children. The human race comes to a screeching halt if homosexuality is the only kind of sexual behavior that's practiced. The species cannot propagate itself. That's why I've always said that Darwinists, evolutionists, ought to be more ardent opponents of homosexuality than evangelical Christians, because they're all about the propagation of the species. Well, comes to a dead screeching stop with homosexuality. So evolutionists ought to be fiercer opponents of the normalization of this behavior even than evangelical Christians, but there's no consistency there, just flat out shameless, irrational hypocrisy. So that's what you are going to get. But Russia's population is declining 750,000 people a year. I mean, we are so accustomed to think of population expansion as something that's normal and population growth as something that just happens. We don't stop and think about it, that there are values that underlie that. The value, for instance, of reserving sex for marriage. That's an important component of growing families. The value we place on children. I saw a article the other day about how expensive it is in America now to raise a child from birth to age 18, like $241,000 or something like that. Well, why is the media putting stories like that out there. They want they want Americans to think that kids are just too expensive. You got to have as few of them as you possibly can. In Germany, 23% of males that were surveyed in Germany said the ideal family size is 0 children. So the media is pushing this idea that smaller families are better. You shouldn't have any kids if possible. And, of course, that leads to population decline. That's what Russia is experiencing. And they're realizing they're going to go out of existence as a nation unless they find some way to boost the fertility rate and place a value on children, place a value on large families. I mean, large families today are anathema in liberal America. And, we're at a point now where the birth rate, the fertility rate among people who have been born in America, that is the native population, is barely at the break-even point. We're barely at the point where we are replacing ourselves. So Russia is understanding, look, our population is shrinking. We're getting smaller by 750,000 people every year. We can't let this continue, or we're gonna breed ourselves out of existence by not breeding, by not having children. So they're trying to reverse what is a very alarming trend. And one of the ways is to try to reduce the number of teenagers that experiment with and go in to the homosexual lifestyle. Now, it's been interesting to me that the silence in the pro-family community in America. I don't know if I've heard hardly anybody in the pro-family community in America speak up in defense of this law, and I'm here to do that today. I've got a column up at our blog site, rightlyconcerned.com, in which I defend this law. It's kind of striking to me because what Russia's done here with this law is they have expressed the values that we have been advocating for years and years and years. We think this is risky behavior. It's a risky lifestyle. It's unnatural. It's unhealthy. It's dangerous. It's immoral. We should not be propagating this among our teenagers. Well, this is exactly what Russia has established as official public policy. So in my mind, we ought to be celebrating this. And I don't know what the timidity is, why there's such a hesitancy in the pro-family community to support this law. I'm not sure what the reason for that is. But this is public policy that we've been advocating, and here's a nation in the world that's actually putting it into practice. And I want to support what Russia has done here by just looking at some information from the Centers for Disease Control. This is a federal agency. This is not some member of the vast right-wing conspiracy. This is not a research arm of the Family Research Council or the American Family Association. This is the Centers for Disease Control. And I found this report. It's got shocking details that was issued by the CDC back in 2011 about the enormous health risks that gay and lesbian teens experience. That was my specific concern. What research is out there to talk about the health implications of homosexual activity among teenagers? Because that's the specific topic of the Russian law. Now, here's what I found. And this is shocking stuff to me, and it ought to alarm everybody that cares about youth in America. Gay and lesbian teens are, according to the CDC, not according to me or the AFA, they are more than 3 times as likely as heterosexual students to have been forced to have sexual intercourse against their will. 24% of gay and lesbian teens have been forced to have sexual intercourse against their will, 7.2% among heterosexual teens. They are 3 times more likely to have had sexual intercourse with 4 or more persons, 30% to 11%. They are 4 times more likely to have had sexual intercourse before age 13, 20% to 5%. Half as likely to use protection during sexual intercourse, 36% to 66%. Almost 3 times more likely to have experienced dating violence, 28% to 10%. This is something that you won't hear a lot of people talking about, but the rate of domestic partner violence is extremely high in the homosexual community. This fact that they're 3 times more likely to have experienced dating violence, that continues right into adulthood. The level of domestic partner violence in lesbian and homosexual relationships in adulthood is anywhere from 2 to 4 times what it is in heterosexual households. They are 1.5 times more likely to have felt sad or hopeless. These are talking about teenagers now. So it's bad for mental and emotional health. 3 times more likely to have seriously considered suicide. 4 times more likely to have actually attempted suicide, 26% to 6%. 3 times more likely to smoke more than 10 cigarettes a day, 28% to 9%. So it leads to some very unhealthy personal behaviors. 1.5 times more likely to use marijuana. And catch this, 8 times more likely to use cocaine. 8 times. Gay and lesbian teens are 8 times more likely to use cocaine. 16.6% to 1.8%. 3.5 times more likely to use inhalants. 5 times more likely to have used ecstasy. 9 times more likely to have used heroin. And 6 times more likely to have used methamphetamines. And a catastrophic 10 times more likely to have injected illegal drugs. And remember, the 2 primary risk factors for HIV/AIDS is men who have sex with men and those who shoot up with drugs. And they are 10 times more likely to shoot up with drugs, 15% to 1.5%. Now, here is my nomination for the understatement of the year. The CDC concludes their own report by saying this, quote, compared with students who are not sexual minorities, a disproportionate number of sexual minority students engage in a wide range of health risk behaviors. No kidding. So this is true, you remember, with regard to sexual practices, intimate partner violence, suicidal ideation, depression, substance abuse of all kinds. In other words, this is not a normal, healthy alternative to heterosexuality for teenagers or for anybody else. So there are catastrophic pathologies that are associated with homosexual behavior among teenagers, and any society that cares about its youth will do everything in its power to steer them away from this self-destructive lifestyle. You think about the billions that we are spending urging teens not to take up cigarette smoking. It's time we start spending billions of dollars to urge teens not to take up gay sex. And so the bottom line, I never thought I would ever say this, but for the first time in my life, I believe it is time for us to be more like Russia. You're listening to Focal Point on AFR Talk. Stay with us. We will be right back after these brief messages.